If you weren't already aware, there's a new Delverlike out, made by VibingLeaf, and it's good. Well, for the most part. This game is in a playtest state, and as such, I won't tear into it quite as much as I do for other Delverlikes, especially with bugs, since those are very much to be expected. I had originally planned to have a section about the videos, but the major issue, that being the lighting, was fixed, and so I deemed it unnecessary to talk about now since I talk about game design most of the time anyway. The game, like the others in its genre, is built around ascending floors via a series of tasks while also avoiding corrupted versions of the playable characters. Well, mostly. In actuality, there are also enemies that aren't just pre-existing playable characters, and are just entirely separate entities, which is a huge step up from just having every enemy be playable, and I am very happy with that change and have been waiting for it to become more commonplace. With that out of the way, I can talk about the first real aspect of the game: the task design. Before we get into that though, please subscribe, and leave any criticisms you have down below, as I'm always trying to improve my content. Funhouse, instead of opting for the skill check route, actually designs its tasks around playing an arcade machine and doing little WarioWare style microgames. And if you know me, you'll know I love WarioWare and am absolutely a sucker for microgames and systems like this. Heck, my own RPG is literally a mash of WarioWare and RPG mechanics. Like, I love this. That doesn't mean it's entirely immune to flaws though. One of the biggest criticisms I have is that there's just only 3 different minigame types, so it does get a bit repetitive. This may very well be remedied in the future though, as they're currently working on new machine types and have already announced it. It has though actually somewhat been remedied by the enemy design. This game actually takes quite a bit of a unique stance on enemies. Like I said before, there are 2 categories. These are actually named, and they're called outcasts and cryptids. Cryptids are your usual corrupted versions of the playable characters, and right now aren't very unique, so I won't really be talking about them. They're basic, they just follow you. Pretty much all of them do that. Outcasts, on the other hand, are significantly more interesting because they take the nullscape route. Instead of enemies forced to the constraints of the map that are in the same position for every player, basically Dandy's World Twisted, the outcasts are client-side in, meaning you and only you on your own have to defend against them. There's also one more system tied to them, but I'll explain that after introducing the enemies themselves. The current roster of outcasts has 5 characters, though only 3 of them are relevant, as 2 are the shopkeepers of the game, since outcasts are also a lore thing. The primary foes you'll face are Snuggles, Gil, and Baby. Wait, like Baby from the hit game Nullscape? That's right, this video was secretly about Nullscape the entire time. Back to the actual focus, the 2 outcasts you really need to know about are Snuggles and Gil. Gil will appear in certain places, I believe the cryptid spawn points, and if you get near, he'll temporarily slow you down, basically like Ichor Leaks from Dandy's World. His mechanic is more annoying than threatening, but can still mess you up if you aren't careful or are being chased. The real threat is Snuggles, who occasionally appears around you and must be stared at to make him go away. He's designed around randomly appearing, especially when you're working on machines, so he actually makes for an incredibly interesting complement to the task system of any Delverlike really, but especially this one because of how intrusive the tasks are. He has enough of a queue that it doesn't feel unfair, but he's also still a relatively dangerous threat because if you don't hear his audio cue, you're kinda cooked. He also does have this little weird transparent eye decal that appears that makes him even more fair. The final foe, as previously mentioned, is Baby. This baby isn't actually Nullscape inspired, despite the joke, and is essentially just an obstacle that will occasionally appear and is the foil of Snuggles, having you instead look away from it. I haven't noticed it appearing nearly as often as the former though, so it's mostly irrelevant. Now onto that system I mentioned earlier, Poison. This game has an interesting take on health bars, that being, it doesn't technically have one. You've got 3 hearts and this poison meter. You'll lose a heart like normal if you get hit by a cryptid, but you'll actually only up your poison meter if you get hit by an outcast, since they're a lot more prevalent and show up more. This is how they design interesting scenarios that still feel fair within the confines of the pre-existing health system, instead of doing something like Dolly's Factory, rest in peace, where the health system is just so incredibly vast that it makes it super easy to play. I'm curious to see if they'll employ this in the future to fight against distraction if that ever becomes a prevalent mechanic. The next major thing I want to address is the character kits and items. Character kits seem somewhat interesting, but I've only played Anton as of yet and just unlocked Manny, so not too much into it. From what I've played of Anton though, he's pretty fun. His kit consists of 2 abilities. The first is an invisibility skills to throw enemies off of you, and the second is an offensive rush where you hit enemies with a bat. This is relatively simple, sure, but he works as a nice survivalist / sentinel to get your bearings on the game, so he's quite a good starter. I can't say much about the other kits because, like I said, I haven't played them, but from what I've heard, Splits is kinda mostly just because all-rounder supports don't particularly make sense from a design perspective, because I mean, you want to have a niche, especially in a team game like this, and I genuinely haven't heard anything about Manny's kit, so I have no idea. As for items, I found them to be pretty decent and inoffensive. Nothing groundbreaking, but definitely more interesting than its contemporaries like Toons Universe and Dandy's World. The next thing I want to address is the map design because it is a bit rough. Now, before I get into this section, do be aware that VibingLeaf is very much working on these issues and they're remaking most of the maps, so this should hopefully be remedied soon, but it is still an issue, because by far the worst part of this game is the maps. They're very strangely shaped, with very little cover and incredibly odd arcade spawning areas, and that means you'll get into situations like I did where the cryptids walked back and forth in front of the final task for like 20 minutes, making it virtually impossible to complete the task. This combined with a very sparse environmental props to block the enemy's sights in most places just makes for a very frustrating experience and is far and away the most major issue in this game. There's one final thing I need to address, and that's the future of this game. While it has a lot of potential, one of my biggest tip-offs that it could end disastrously was a semi-recent Discord poll talking about adding different game modes. Now, I know, that doesn't sound too bad. Just a couple of new game modes. These look fine too. They're just a boss rush, a mode where you can kill the corrupteds. Wait, nope. That is the wrong game. I meant the cryptids. And an ASIM. An ASIM. Yes, that's right. One of the 3 future conceptual game modes for a game that is in self-proclaimed pre-alpha is an entirely separate ASIM mode. Now, that doesn't mean this will be worked on for a while, and is likely for a future roadmap, but stuff like this is textbook scope creep and is the type of thing that has killed my own projects time and time again. So I really hope that gets scrapped, especially because it also just takes away development time from the game. This isn't like a Dandy's World skin situation where the only thing that takes away from is Quell writing the lore. This directly stunts the growth of the game and could be a major issue. With all of that said, that's just about all my thoughts on the game, so if you enjoyed, please leave a like, subscribe, and join my Discord if you'd like to talk about game design or want info on my future game projects.